Know what you do. Well, it's a true pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Sri Peruvemba is CEO of Marketer International in California. That's his organization. He was previously Chief Marketing Officer for E-Ink Holdings, where he played a major role in transforming the startup to over $1 billion global company. With over 30 years of experience in technology industry, he has been influential advocate in advancement of electronic hardware technologies and a whole bunch of these. He has held numerous senior level positions at Sharp, Cambrios, Novocentis, TFS, Planar, and a slew of other organizations as well. He's based in Silicon Valley. He advises high-tech firms as well as serves on several boards. He has a BS and MBA degrees and postgraduate diplomas in management. Sri is also a right arm off spinner for a cricket team he founded in Silicon Valley. And as most of you will know, off spinner is a very special skill. Leg spinning is the more common skill in cricket. So it's doubly impressive that that's what he is. But you guys all knew that. Without more stuff, we'll listen to Sri. Thank you, Sri, for joining us from California.
Thank you so much, Asad. I obviously cannot see everybody because the screen is focused on the podium, but if somebody that's online can give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Very good. I can see the audience down at the table with the thumbs up. Excellent. I'm generally very loud, so if I were up there, I wouldn't need a microphone. My voice will carry. I was thinking about the last few minutes of the different proceedings that you had versus what I did last week. A very different audience. I went and spoke to a number of the local companies here: Google, Amazon Lab 126, folks at Apple, and then Facebook, or what they call Meta these days, about technology. So for me, this is a little bit different, but I think I will be able to share my journey with you, and hopefully every one of you, including Takira from your local school, can learn a little bit from this. But thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. So I'm an accidental entrepreneur. And let's see. So I'm going to talk to you about my journey. First of all, happy birthday, Asad. The 29th birthday is always the tough one. Though I must say, you looked a little bit older. I would say you looked almost 30 today. So, you may want to work on that. When you, whether you're a student, whether you're in different, early stage of your career, you typically have these three choices. What do you do? When you graduate, do you go get more education, a master's degree, PhD, whatever it is, or do you go get into a job, or do you become an entrepreneur and start your own gig? And if you live here in Silicon Valley, usually the last one tends to be the favorite. In my case, when I started, I didn't have all these three choices. I didn't even know there were such choices. I only had one choice to get a job right after graduation, because my dad had a heart attack when I was in the second year of college. And then my mom retired to take care of dad. So we, growing up in India, there was no concept of working while you're studying. So you're a full-time student or you're full-time on the job. So our family went with no income for about 3 years until I was able to graduate and get a job. So it was very important for us. So I started my first job at this company called AppLab. They made test and measuring instruments, electronic hardware. And I lasted about 6 months as an engineer and didn't like it and moved to this thing called marketing. And that joke from Dilbert kind of sums up what people thought of marketing even back then. But I did quite well. 2 years into my gig, I went to my boss and said, hey, I need to be promoted to the next level. And typically in those days, it took 8 years to get your first promotion. And I was there for less than 2 years when I sought it. And he said, and this doesn't translate well in English, but in the local language, he said, you got to have gray hair even to have this conversation with me. Well, and I don't know how well you can see through the screen. If I was waiting for gray hair, I would probably still be waiting. I took after my mom. My dad had gray hair by the time he reached my age, but mom still has dark hair. Sometimes it's not good to wait. So I went and got myself an additional degree from the Indian Institute of Science, which was at that time regarded one of the best, or still even today, regarded the best university in all of India. And then I got some additional degrees, but none of them really helped me move my career forward. You just get another job with, a little bit more money, but not a whole lot. So I decided I will take the GRE, GMAT exams and the TOEFL exams. TOEFL is test of English as a foreign language, and then move to the US to get a degree. Well, this is kind of how it works when you do something like that. I had, by standards in India, I had plenty of cash. They were in Indian rupees. And about a month before I decided to move, and it takes about a year or year and a half before you sort of write these exams and you apply to schools. There's no internet in those days. Nobody had computers. Well, they had computers in these labs, and each computer was the size of a room. And some of you might have actually used this. I used these punch cards and those kinds of things, but nobody had a computer at home. You didn't communicate with the universities that way. You actually wrote letters, and they took a month for you to get a response. Around that time, the government of India devalued their currency from 1:17. So $1 was 17 Indian rupees to 1:34. Wonderful. My money in Indian rupees was the same. In converted dollars, they were reduced in half. So I went from having what I thought a bunch of dollars to a bunch of coins. And then end of my first week in the US, after paying the first semester fees and the deposit on the apartment, so on and so forth, I was left with $200 in my pocket, no other money to go back. And that was how I got started. So I went from getting an engineering degree to literally what I remembered was my first job was working at Pizza Hut. And also, interestingly enough, I had never eaten a pizza before. So that was quite a challenge to get started there. Great experience. Love it. Even today, soft corner for anybody that works in that retail restaurant industry. I managed to get a degree in marketing, an MBA. And with that, I started my path. So as I mentioned before, I had a degree, worked in India for 5 years, got a master's degree, came to the US or moved to the Chicago area and started as an engineer. My original plan was to be in the US for about a year and go back to India, work for the same company I did before, where they would give me an opportunity to run a small business. Instead, the very first job was with this company called Centronic in Illinois. I started as an engineer and became an assistant manager and then a product manager, director of marketing, and a vice president in about 1 year. And I said, oh, they never asked me if I have gray hair. They just kept promoting me because you just worked. And I said, this must be what they call the American dream. And I decided I'm not going back. And so my next move was to work for a company in Wisconsin that got me started in the electronic display industry, and I've stayed in that industry ever since. I was a manager there, and then our company got acquired by a company in Portland, Oregon. I went to work for them and became director of marketing. And I left that company after about 5 years, and became general manager for a company out of Phoenix, Arizona called 35 Systems. And subsequently, from 35, I went to work for Sharp, which was one of the most profitable display companies in the world. I had a P&L responsibility there. And from Sharp, I got recruited into this unknown startup company out of Boston called E-Ink, where I started as a vice president, became chief marketing officer. Our business took off like a rocket. When I got there, we were doing about $10 million in revenue. Our customer was doing another $10 million. So together, it was a $20 million worldwide market for these types of products, these electronic displays, the kind that you see in the Amazon Kindle and many others. And this business became a $1.4 billion business in a very short time. And We worked like crazy. We built out a very good company. And in the process, we ran out of money and we sold our company. And that's when I had a nice exit in 2009. Since then, I started my own company, and I've been climbing this career ladder. I've been saving all these business cards. There are too many to list here. One of the things I had to do was, going from the chief marketing officer for $1 billion company with a very large team, 70, 80 people, plus the company had 10,000 employees, and I was part of a 8-member management team, to having a very large budget, several millions of dollars. And at that time, they were the most profitable display company in the world, ahead of Samsung and LG and Sharp and many other companies. But when you start on your own, you leave that, it's a leap of faith. And I'm sure many of you have done this. And what I found out was the income stops instantly, but expenses do not. And one of the things that I did not know, that now when I mentor and help people, I always say, before you jump and take this leap of faith, it may be good for you to write down a plan. I don't call it a plan, I actually call it an obituary. Only because it's shocking when you tell somebody to write their obituary, and it doesn't work well across all cultures. I tried to get students in Taiwan, China, and India to write obituaries, and I was told that was not appropriate for me to make such a request. Whereas in the US and Europe, kids are fine, they love it, and they understand, as morbid as it is, obituary, kind of, that word causes you to react differently. I looked at a lot of different things. I read a lot of stuff, and a couple of people had certain tools that helped me in my journey. One was this guy, Tony Robbins, in terms of habits and so on. And then Jack Canfield, the guy who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. He had this law of attraction theory, which I still have a tough time understanding how it works, but it worked for me. The very first thing I did was I plunked down money. Now that I had some money from my exit, I plunked down money in 3 different startups, and I also became automatically board member. And after 6 months, I realized when you invest your own money and you're part of a board, your behavior changes and you try to do the CEO's job. And I said, this is not working for me. And since then, if I invest in a company, I don't have any management or board role in that company, because I'm trusting somebody else to do a good job, which is why I invested. I do a lot of due diligence and then leave it at that. So in general, out of these 3 companies, one went bankrupt, the other 2 still exist. And but I'm no longer involved. It's just that I'm an investor. And with these types of learnings, I decided that, what are some ways for me to build out my business. So I started trying to help different companies. And one of the companies that is Kent Display, where Asa, this current CEO, at that time, his predecessor invited me, and with some strong language saying, what the heck am I doing, tinkering around stuff, and I should be part of the team help, which I was doing about 1 day per week. And I started a business. And today that business has grown pretty tremendously. And I currently serve as a board director for an electronic paper company in Slovenia. And I'm an advisor for an agri-tech company, and I know very little about ag tech. I'm just there because I help them fundraise and so on. And they coat apples and other fruits to keep them fresh for much longer. And it's a tremendous company. There's a lot of social aspects to it and so on. I'm a board member of a publicly traded company that builds wireless audio for your home. I'm an advisor for an display materials company in Poland, and I'm chairman of the board of another company in Montreal. And I also, other than these board roles, in the second row, you see these companies. I'm an advisor in a transistor company out of Oregon. I'm chief marketing officer for a company out of the UK. I'm the chief marketing advisor for a company out of upstate New York. And I'm head of marketing for a company out of North Carolina. Advisor for a 3-dimensional display company in Brooklyn. And then other than that, I volunteer my time. In spite of having all of these things, I actually have more time on my hands than when I had a single job. I volunteer my time for the Society of Information Display, which is a nonprofit body in our industry. I'm also an associate editor for them. I write articles, I interview people, that kind of thing. I mentor about 35 people in the industry, including individuals that work for Apple and Amazon and Google and so on, because they're sort of here in my neighborhood. And in the last 7 or 8 years, I've helped about 250 people find jobs. Mostly I try to help friends, because I have about a contact list of about 10,000 people any given time. At least 10 or 15 of them are unemployed, and I'm able to help and assist. And then I also serve by speaking at universities and to students all over the world wherever possible. Locally, I speak at the Santa Clara University. One of the professor has me come in every semester to give a talk on marketing, and I help those students and keep in touch and so on. And of course, we talked about cricket. I'm not going to go into that. If it was baseball, it would be more of a conversation here. Cricket is a weird game, even for those of us that play it. But what did I learn from this? And this is what I was hoping I would share much more than any other slide so far. There are obviously multiple different paths, as many of you have realized in your careers, and course correction is possible. A lot of times when you're earlier in your career, you think you have a certain path and that's it. No, you can pretty much course correct and do different things. So I started on a job, and then I went and got more education, and I also am an entrepreneur today. There are glass ceilings everywhere. In this country now, in the last few years, there's a constant thing about, if you are a minority, whether it's the color of your skin or whatever those reasons are, you have glass ceilings. I think glass ceilings exist for everybody. I live in Silicon Valley, and you would think there's less of it here. There are people born and raised in California that have been in the same job for 25 years. We discriminate about people over the age of 55 in terms of finding jobs. I help people over 55 in finding their next job. There's glass ceilings everywhere. My personal experience has been just sidestep them. It takes too long to go bang your head against those ceilings. And then, all of us have strengths and weaknesses. I made a list of my strengths and weaknesses when I started my own gig. It turns out my list of weaknesses is twice as long as my list of strengths. I never ever put that in my resume in the past, but when you discover that, that's a pretty humbling experience. But you cannot go correct your weaknesses to the point where they become as strong as somebody else's strength. No, it's never going to happen. It's kind of like my saying, I'm going to polish my East Indian accent to the point where I'll be able to speak English just like one of you that were born and raised here. Not going to happen. I just have to polish it to the point where you're able to understand what I'm saying. Actually, you'll understand better if I speak slower, but that's hard for me to do as well. But your focus should be on your strength. And when you focus on your strength, that's where you're going to get to the top of your field. I have this motto that I've been following. It works great for me, and I thought I would share. This is not something that I created. I heard this 20 years ago, and so you always want to think big, right? Whatever it is that you take on, think big, but don't invest all of your money or all of your time on it. So start small, so you can try it. And then your competitive edge is in your ability to move fast. And when you move fast, you realize that you can do a lot more. You can also, experiment much more. Today, what are some opportunities in the market that I see? There's this whole next wave of computing that's arriving. We are no longer going to be using laptops, tablets, phones the way we've been using for the last 10, 15, 20 years. There's a new way of computing coming. We should be aware of it. Many of those things will not succeed. They will fail. Many of them will succeed. And I have written articles about this. I've spoken in public. If any one of you are interested, please reach out to me. I'm happy to share these to give you more opportunity to think about these things. I don't need to say a whole lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning. There's a lot of stuff written on it. Robotics is something that I'm observing. What I mean by robotics may be slightly different from what is a common perception. Let me explain. So today, one of the things you hear is you go on an airplane I've started traveling domestically. I've made about 4 different trips in the last 5 weeks to the East Coast. And you notice that we as a traveling public are a little bit more angry. We are a little bit more rude to the flight attendants. And this is well documented. There is evidence of this. But part of it, I also notice, is the flight attendants are also getting to be reciprocating, even with people who are very polite and generally very nice. So it is very possible a lot of roles where there are humans participating. Take, for example, if you go into an airport, into the counter, Alaska Airlines was one of the first ones 25 years ago to put kiosks. To me, those are like robots, right? And people prefer to use the kiosk rather than talk to a human being to interact with them. And this is a worldwide phenomenon, even in countries like China and India, where they have a lot of people, they still like automation. And this is something that we need to think about. There's a big trend coming. Fighting it is a waste of time. There's a way to embrace it and benefit from it. Health is going to be another big thing. As much as you stand in front of your mind to guard against the things that you absorb, similarly, we have to be very careful about what we eat. There's a big trend in this area. And I'm no expert, but I pay attention to this stuff. And then food itself. Food is going to be the next very big thing. Whether it's growing apples, whether it's, Asad actually has a staff member that grows grapes and wine. He makes wine in Ohio, and I've tasted it. It's wonderful. These are the kind of areas I think there's going to be a big emphasis, not just technology, not the next watch, not the next laptop, not the next phone. I strongly believe in this mentor-mentee type of relationship. I personally mentor 35 people, I believe about 35 people. And then I myself am a mentee. I have my personal board of directors of people that have done what I've done before. And they don't know they're on my personal board of directors. The board never meets together. I talk to them one-on-one and learn from them. And that's helped me a lot. I constantly set goals. I always believe goals are very important. And I always believe we need to have a North Star. Every time I run a team, my team will always start their weekly report by citing what their North Star is, so we constantly remind ourselves. Let me see. Okay, and then there are these habits, both for your mind and body. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it. I think I explained a little bit previously. Gratitude is something I think has been a very important part, at least in the last 2 years, even more so. Every morning I wake up and I think of 3 things that I'm grateful for. And then, and basically what I do is I close my eyes and hold my hands kind of like this and pump out air from me like this, about 30 times. And it's a breathing exercise. And after that, I think of 3 things that I'm grateful for. Yes, there you go. Usually I start all of my speeches by having everybody stand and jump up and down. I've caused Asad and others to jump many times, but because you were eating lunch, I didn't want to do that today. Otherwise, I'm much more animated in person. But I think of 3 things that I'm grateful for. And after that, I do 30 more times of this breathing exercise and think of 3 things I'm going to get done that day. And those kind of habits really, really are beneficial to me. And I thought I would share. And finally, serving. A lot of times I get invited to speak, I get invited to mostly these tech companies that I mentioned here locally, sometimes to the universities, Santa Clara University, San Jose University, and occasionally to Stanford. And to me, all of it is, you don't get paid to do this. You don't have to do any of these things. And many of you have speakers that come and speak to you. They don't have to do it. There's no immediate benefit to any of them. But it's part of serving, part of giving something. And if you can share your journey, and if somebody learns something from it, you have served in your own very small little way. And I believe that's a very big thing. And with that, I will stop. And if you have questions, I'm very happy to answer.
It's working. Oh, hello. Dave hit the button. Thanks, Dave. Thank you very much, Sri. It was a wonderful talk. Does anyone have questions that we want to ask? And then just a couple questions. Dave, was that one from somebody online? Okay. Anybody have a question? Well, with that, oh, yes, Asad.
I'll ask a question, Sri. If you have such a diverse experience and so many different organizations and places, maybe share with us something that was an ultimate challenge, something that really sticks in your head. And because I'm sure you've had to live through a million of those.
So more recently, I was working with a very small company that had a very tough time taking its technology to market and raising money. And when we were this close to giving up, the CEO and I decided that we would sign up to stay with this until we raise money, no matter what. And all we said was just that. And the next moment onwards, our thinking and attitude and the way we pitched and everything changed. And within 6 weeks, we were able to get the first investor. A few weeks later, in fact, literally last week, the CEO just informed me that we are actually raising more money than we wanted. And I think there's a certain attitude about how you go about doing things. When you go do things with a sort of like a force, with a very positive attitude, these things work out much better. I'll give you another example. Since I mentor a number of people, help unemployed people, there was this young lady that was introduced to me by somebody at Intel, and she said she's been looking for a job for a year and she's had a very tough time. And I could tell her attitude was, nobody wants to hire me, I'm female, I'm getting discriminated, and she had all these reasons. And I said, okay, here's something I'm gonna tell you. I said, I'm gonna stay with you until you find a job. And she looked at me and she said, nobody's ever said that to me before. And I don't know how long it takes, because she had already been looking for a job for 1 year. And as soon as I said that, her whole attitude changed. Her interviewing skills improved. Her, everything she did was much more. And she actually encouraged me to do more. And in the end, in about 4 or 5 weeks after that first meeting, she was able to secure a job. At this time was with Apple, and that was on the top of her list. Though I would not have recommended she go to Apple, her personality probably wouldn't fit, but it did. She got a job, much higher pay than she expected, and she's doing quite well. And I think a lot of times we think when these hurdles are so big and we're about to give up, there's always that moment you say, okay, I only climbed a little hill and somebody's presented Mount Everest to me, I'm still going to do it. And something in you changes your attitude, and you influence everybody around you, and you can go off and go achieve that. And as kind of vague as the sound, I wanted to give you those two examples where we genuinely had success, both with the startup company raising money, as this young lady finding a job much better than what she had expected.
Thank you. Sri, it's a tradition in our club that we have a responder for each of our presentations, and today's responder is David Summers.
Sri, thank you so much. On behalf of Rotary, it was a pleasure to listen to you today, listen to your presentation. Your passion for what you do is very obvious, and I think your message rang true with many of us who have started our own businesses or who have ran our own businesses. I particularly enjoyed your lessons learned, and particularly the suggestion that we all run into a glass ceiling of some sort and take the easiest way around, just sidestep it. Makes all the sense in the world. And by the way, I was also encouraged to know that now that I have gray hair and I'm retired, that I'm likely to get a promotion. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So before we say our four-way test, I'd like to remind everybody that Rebecca is sitting over there waiting to take your reservations for our holiday Jingle and Mingle event on December 3rd. And it's $28 a person. And so you can talk to Rebecca. But let's say our four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thanks, everybody.